Welcome to the Remarkable Relationship Show with Mercy Russell, where we find the wonder in your story. I will be your host for the next hour. I have over 35 years of experience applying the science of relationship systems to my practice of psychotherapy and leadership consulting. My intuitive skills allow me to bring clarity and vision to your challenges. I hope you will be surprised in the next hour.
Good morning. This is Mercy Russell with the Remarkable Relationship Show. My goal is to bring a fresh perspective to you on all things related to how humans develop their individual brilliance while navigating the excitement, stickiness, and resistance in their relationships. In my 40 years of working as a psychotherapist and consultant, I have been continually amazed at the ways in which people overcome challenges. I hope to share my experience and insights so you can find the magic in your relationships. So, good morning. I'm here today with my guest, Cynthia Lane. She's my teacher. And today she has, graciously agreed to talk with me today and to share with us her journey, and hopefully we'll get to have a good conversation about life as we know it here on earth in all its wonder. So hello, Cynthia.
Hi, Mercy. How are you?
I'm good. Great to be here with you always. So I just wanted to sort of start by just talking a little bit about how we met and how I know you. I'll just to tell the audience, and then we'll get to talk about that time of your life. But I met Cynthia in 1971 in Minnesota when she was teaching Transcendental Meditation, and I was a student at Carleton College, and was encouraged by my dance teacher to learn TM. And Cynthia was my teacher. And, the process of learning TM involves a couple of days, let's say. I can't remember, 5 days. Okay, 5 days. So I got probably, spent that much time with her, and then didn't see her again for many years. But I've never forgot her name. And in the ensuing years, actually, what happened from my perspective, what happened next was that in 2017, I heard an interview of Cynthia on a website with I think Lauren Gailey or somebody, I can't remember who.
Jacqueline Johnston, I think.
Oh, okay. Yes, right. That it was a website where people with different spiritual interests were interviewed, but I recognized her name right away. So I listened to the interview, and then I contacted her. And when I contacted her, she then reminded me of all the connections we had in the years in between. That I met my first husband. I started practicing TM in 1971, and in 1980, I continued to meditate and to take different classes and different courses. I went to an advanced course in Iowa where I met my first husband. And the way I had worked for a TM executive, which was a teacher of the cities program in New York City, and I had met a couple of other TM teachers there, people who had been with the movement from early on, we were all working at Business Week magazine. And my first husband, David Vivian, was a close friend of one of these, Bow and Cobb, who I worked with. So when I met David, we had this connection, and I think in the years following, I got to be very close with Alan and Mary. And Mary, and I remember now when Cynthia reminded me that Mary told me that she and Cynthia I think I told her the name of my teacher, and she said, "Oh yes, Cynthia and I are very good friends." So by the time I contacted Cynthia in 2017, she knew something about me, right?
A
So
little
that's
bit, the barest outline.
the barest outline, right? And just to say, at that point in my journey with TM, and then and another spiritual teacher, I had never had a personal teacher, and that was not how TM worked. So after I was initiated, all my experiences I sort of had to sort out myself. And when I met Cynthia again in 2017, she had gone down her path quite a ways, and it was just the perfect time for us to connect and for me to have a personal teacher. So that's my story of how we met. I would just really like to, start with, now I'd just sort of like to I'd like to have you tell about your story and sort of just your background, how you became a meditation teacher, and then how that has that part of the path has led to what you've done since.
Well, I think I was born a spiritual seeker, I guess you could say. Even when I was very young, I mean, I thought about God all the time, and didn't necessarily have any overwhelming clear experience, but God, the divine, was always very much in my awareness. I was attracted to people who wrote about spiritual experiences and so on. But I had no sense of, that I might find a teacher, or even that there were systems that would satisfy me or fulfill me. So at my first 2 years of college were in Portland, Oregon at Reed College. And there, the people I met, my very best friends, were all spiritually oriented. And one friend in particular was deep into Zen meditation, which was probably my first opening to teachers from the East. But again, I had nobody to teach me about anything I could read, or we could talk or something like that. And then in 1966, I left Reed College and went down to San Francisco at the height of the whole Haight-Ashbury flower child universe. And I went to San Francisco State, and absolutely, I think every spiritual teaching you could ever want to encounter, and psychological, it's kind of new age psychological technologies and stuff like that. Everything was around. It was such a big garden of possibilities. It was hard to choose. The first person that made a really deep impression on me was a beautiful, beautiful man named Meher Baba, Meher, who some people considered an avatar. He had been in silence for a long, long time. And
can you just tell our audience what an avatar is? Not everyone might know that term.
Well, he's supposed to be an incarnation of divinity. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. But all I knew about was that I was very attracted to him. That was my first introduction to the idea of a spiritual guru or teacher. And what he basically taught was love, just love, 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 love. And I understood the kind of love he was talking about. I knew I wasn't doing it. but I wanted to, but he didn't offer a technology, so to speak, and a path, a teaching that could take you there, to that place. So during that time, that was the time when Maharishi was first becoming well known. A couple of friends of mine had learned, very good friends, had learned Transcendental Meditation, and they loved it. And so I decided that I would learn it. And at that time, this would have been in 1967, Maharishi was showing up personally. So I was going to school in San Francisco State. He came to Berkeley and gave an introductory lecture. And I remember sitting in the front row at the end of the lecture. All kinds of people were going up to try to talk to him. I wasn't ready for that. But I was absolutely fascinated by the idea of what is a guru. So I watched him and I watched him, and I particularly loved the way he answered questions. I still remember some of the answers he gave, which were, I'll give you an example, just for fun. He would, now this was an audience full of students. This was Berkeley in 1967. Yes, people were interested in all things spiritual, but they were students and they weren't just taking things for granted. So he made two statements. He said, one is, if you meditate, all your desires will be fulfilled. And two, if you're meditating and you're in any kind of competitive situation with a non-meditator, the meditator will always win because he or she would be using more of their intelligence and creativity. So one student stood up, really quite didn't like either of those statements, and said, okay, Marcy, what if you have a company and there's only one position of advancement and two people are competing for that position and they both meditate? Then what happens? Well, he just burst into laughter. He had the greatest laugh, and he said, well, then the company will expand. So that's, what I saw there was an example of somebody who saw, who was so creative and saw solutions rather than problems and blah, blah, blah. But anyway, so very shortly after that, I learned TM, and it was just like I was on a magic carpet, and I knew I had found what I was looking for. That, really from the first day that I learned TM, I felt the results and felt really good about it. And then Maharishi came back to California in the summer of '68 and offered a course. And then I decided I wanted to become a TM teacher, and it took me a while to save the money to do that. And then in 1970, I went to Europe again to study with him. I became a teacher after 6 months.
Mm-hmm. There was 6 months of study with him in Europe.
Yes. Uh-huh.
And you you have told me about the day that he taught you, that he
made me a teacher,
that he made you a teacher.
Right. It was an extraordinary day, extraordinary moment. Right from the moment when he made me a teacher, I just felt like my whole consciousness shift into what I would now call a higher state of consciousness, into a state of just profound union with all that is. Just I was everything was me. There was absolutely seamless union. I mean, it didn't stay because I had a lot more growing to do to stabilize it, but I did have that opening, and it lasted for a couple of days. It was really quite ecstatic and a huge gift from Maharishi and the cosmos.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And then after that, all I wanted to do was teach. I felt like if that man could trust me to take his teaching into the world, I was going to live up to that trust, no matter what, through thick and thin. And that's what I did. My first teaching was in England, and then I came back to the US and onward from there.
And when you came, so if that was 1970 that you were made a teacher.
So 71 was May 71. You're right.
Because I learned in the spring of, no, maybe it was 72.
You learned in 70.
No, it was my sophomore year. So it was 1970. Yeah, it was the spring of 72. And that's when you were teaching in the Midwest.
Right. So it was May 71, May 14th to be exact, that I became a TM teacher. And from there, I just went to England. I was there for about a month, and then I came back to the East Coast.
Right.
Which is where I started teaching.
You started teaching there, but then by the time I learned to teach, you were out in the Midwest.
104 things happened. And I was able to talk to Maharishi. He was in Massachusetts the summer of 71, and I had 4 offers of being invited of different places to teach. And he told, and all of which were places I was familiar with, California, East Coast, and but also in Minnesota, where I had never been. And he said, it's always better to go to a new place. So that was that. I got in the car and off I went. You know, I was in those days.
Uh-huh.
You had a suitcase and a box of books, and off you went.
Right. Now, I remember, I think I probably heard this from Mary, because it wouldn't be the kind of thing you would tell me, but I think I heard that you had a record for a while of initiating the most people.
I did.
All those captive students, you know, who had $35 in their pocket.
Right. Well, you know, my first year of teaching in the Midwest, really, it was a magical time. And it was that way, I think, for many, many people who taught in the Midwest. It was just ripe for this teaching, as if people were sitting around and waiting for us. And it was, you know, mostly students, but all you had to do was put up a few posters, and, you know, you'd get a packed lecture hall, and everybody would sign up almost no matter what you said.
Right. Isn't that interesting, huh? Yeah. Yeah. It was, and it was contagious. I mean, I got my dance teacher learned to meditate.
I remember them.
He told all of us we had to learn to meditate. So we all marched down, and, you know, and then we'd sit, and then I had 2 roommates. I think there were 5 of us in 3 adjoining rooms, and we all learned to meditate, and we'd all meditate every morning and every evening together.
It was great.
It was a little, you know, sort of bubble. Yeah, it was a really great experience for me too. I have been.
And believe me, it was a very sweet experience for me to have it to teach all those people. It was such a privilege to teach meditation. It really was. I'm forever grateful.
Yeah, I'm just remembering I was just thinking what it would be like to spend your days doing that, because it was such a you know, kind of quiet, profound, you know, experience. So you then were with the movement for a long time.
28 years.
28 years.
Doing one thing or another. Sometimes teaching, sometimes with Maharishi.
Uh-huh. But so you taught, but you also taught in a variety of settings.
Yeah. Or places.
Right.
Yeah. So, you know, in many places.
You sort of taught in corporate settings as well as in.
Right.
Yeah. General, as well as with the general public.
Right.
Right.
And in, you know, in universities, in, you know, just general public, whatever. And in a lot of different places. Philippines, England, you know, just lots of different places. India,
yeah. So, and then there's just, you know, for people who don't know about this, the TM, you know, activities. Were you on Mother Divine?
Right. So at a certain point, Maharishi had decided he wanted to have a group of people who would live the classical life of monks and nuns, except it was non-denominational. In other words, it was people from, you know, whatever variety of faiths wanted to show up, or no faith at all. And so the men were called Purusha, and the women were called Mother Divine. And I was on that program, which was really, you know, like the classical life of a nun for 7 years. Mm-hmm. in several different countries. We were in Washington, D.C. for a long time. We were in Puerto Rico for a year. Where else were we? It all starts to feel so long ago. We were in Holland. We were in Switzerland. And we moved around.
And part of that movement, just from my understanding, was based on the mission that Maharishi had of having groups of meditators travel to different parts of the world because of the influence of a group of meditators on the general society and the consciousness that it could uplift the social situation wherever they were. And
Maharishi had a degree in physics. He had actually had a BA in physics before he became Maharishi, or before he began to study with his teacher. And he loved physics, and he loved finding parallels, if not exact matches, between the Vedic description of creation and the universe and the most current findings of modern physics, in particular quantum physics. And he always had some outrageously brilliant physicists around him. And one of the things that they pointed out to him was that if you have a system of waves, energy waves, quantum physics, remember, deals with not with particles, but that which precedes particles, the wave system, the non-particulate system. And so if you have a system of
you're talking about waves of energy, or
waves of energy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
In most given systems, the waves are not coherent. So this one's going like this, and another one's going like this, and another one's going like that. So if you can get those energy waves to line up to be exactly coherent, then they become extraordinarily powerful. It's like the difference between a regular light coming from a regular light bulb and the light coming and laser light, which is a perfectly coherent system. Okay. And one thing we knew from a huge amount of brainwave research was that when people practiced the TM technique, their brain waves, instead of being, a little bit of this and a little bit of that, they lined up within particular frequencies, became completely coherent. So it turns out that to go from an incoherent system like regular light to a perfectly coherent and infinitely more powerful system like laser light, you just had to get the square root of 1% of the components in the system to line up. And that coherent functioning was so much more powerful than incoherent functioning that it would pull everything else into alignment. Okay. Mm-hmm. So he got this idea that if you took the square root of 1% of a particular population and you put, and they were all meditating together, that they might possibly pull the rest of the society's brainwaves into coherence, and that should then change the behavior of the society as a whole. So that was where that came from.
Right. So, and that was a big.
I hope I explained that right.
You did. You explained it very nicely. And I think it will
Okay.
really tie into what we'll talk about when we talk about
Mm-hmm.
your current focus. So, right. At one point, so you eventually left the TM organization and your team.
Right. Well, I stopped working for them.
You stopped working for them, right?
Yeah. It was basically I was came to a certain age, and I realized that I had to get my material life together. There had to be a balance between spiritual devotion and material well-being, and I needed to get things together, and I therefore could no longer afford to work for the TM organization, which really didn't pay anything most of the time except for a stipend.
Mm-hmm. Right. But that also then kind of coincided with your introduction to a Native American teacher.
Right. I spent about a year just kind of gradually remembering who I was as a human being and not just a TM teacher. So I kind of pulled out of, it's not that I was still meditating. I still lived in Fairfield, Iowa, but I was recovering we could say my humanness and who I was, other than just a TM teacher. And that was about a year. During that year, some very good friends of mine had become involved with a Native American man who lived up in Des Moines, and they really wanted me to join his teaching circle. And I really didn't want to, because I just wanted to continue on this path of just being free of any teaching. But eventually, after about a year, all the arrows, you get to recognize arrows in your life were pointing, go and study with this man. And so I did that. And I think it was almost preordained. When I was a little girl, I was totally fascinated by Native Americans. I made myself a tunic I'm like, 9 years old, with embroidered teepees on it and fringes. And
in Brooklyn, right? Weren't you? You were in New York.
It was in Manhattan, in New Jersey when that happened, actually. And where did all that come from? We'd go to the Natural History Museum every year, or the Museum of the City of New York, where they had these big dioramas of the Native Americans meeting with the Pilgrims, and I'd stick my nose up against that glass, and boy, did I want to climb in. So it was always kind of there in the background. But whoever dreamed that you would run into somebody who'd be willing to teach you? So I moved to Des Moines and began really quite a deep dive into Lakota teachings. And then I met another man who actually lived in South Dakota on the Cheyenne River Reservation, he was just a wonderful man. And he was a mentor and a friend, not a formal teacher. But he would talk and talk and talk, and I would listen and listen and listen. And it was wonderful. And I was fortunate to receive a pipe from him. I went to 14 sun dances, which if you've been to even one, you would understand the power of transformation of that. And it was a beautiful time. Very fortunate.
So we need to take a break, but okay. When I come back, I want to dive a little bit more into that episode of learning for you.
Okay.
And so that we can then kind of move on to what it is you're teaching now, and how this has really come together. So this is Mercy Russell with the Remarkable Relationship Show. I'm here today with my guest, Cynthia Lane, and we'll be right back after the break.
Do you make a positive difference in the world? Do you have a talent, philosophy, base of knowledge, product, or service that you know could help a lot of people if only you could reach them? Join Alternative Talk 1150's family of broadcasters and start walking down a fruitful path. As host of your very own program, dial 425-653-1150 and find out just how affordable it can be to have a show on 1150 AM. That's 425-653-1150. Alternative Talk. We have an opportunity waiting just for you.
Hi, tune into my new show, The Remarkable Relationship Show, with me, Mercy Russell. I bring a fresh perspective on all things related to how humans develop their individual brilliance while navigating the excitement, stickiness, and resistance in their relationships. Wednesdays from 9 to 10 a.m., and you can visit my website at leadershipwithmercy.com.
Easy on the ears, good for the soul. Alternative Talk 1150.
Hello, this is Mercy Russell with the Remarkable Relationship Show, and I'm here today with my guest, Cynthia Lane. She's my teacher, and we've just been talking about her path, and we were just talking about her movement into studying with Lakota teachers. And Cynthia, you mentioned you mentioned a sun dance, and you also mentioned the pipe. And I wish. Could you explain a little bit what the significance of those types of events are? And I'm also, to whatever degree you'd like, but also what shifted for you in your belief system, your orientation to your spirituality? What were you learning that during that time?
Okay. Well, not to minimize in any way the pipe and the Sundance, really, because nothing made a bigger change in my life than than receiving that pipe. Learning TM and receiving the pipe were really, just milestones in my life. But to do justice to those would be a whole nother conversation, which I'd be delighted to have, but much longer.
Yeah.
So, but perhaps from a personal evolutionary perspective, what happened for me was a complete, like 180-degree reversal of my approach to the so-called spiritual path. So in the Vedic system of growth, at least as I received it from Maharishi, the key to everything is transcending. You close your eyes and your awareness goes beyond everything in the relative creation, however subtle, and you slip into the infinite, which is the source with a capital S of yourself and of all that is and is your true nature. So it's a process of transcending the world, transcending the relative, transcending the manifestation. And then you bring that, more and more of that infiniteness integrates into your awareness, and you live that in everyday life. In the Native American tradition, that again, this is the sliver of it that I received, the approach is quite different. You don't find the transcendent by closing your eyes. You find the transcendent by opening yourself completely to the creation, which is ultimately an expression of the infinite. So I discovered that the description of the outcome of the path was exactly the same in the Vedic tradition and the Native American tradition, which was a wonderful thing to discover, but the way to get there was very different. So, for instance, part of my training was we would go out in the woods at night, even in the winter in Iowa, I might say, I might comment. It was very cold. And we were given certain teachings and we kept our eyes open. Okay, you did not close your eyes. And what he said was, as you're sitting out or standing out in the woods, don't focus on the trees, focus on the space between the trees. Don't focus on the sound of the drum, focus on the gap between the beats. So the whole thing was to discover the infinite silence at the foundation of creation, but through all of your senses. So that was, the breaking of a habit of, we could say, 28 years. But for me, absolutely critical, because it meant that, number one, I was finding the infinite, not just in myself, but refining my senses to find it in everything and in everyone. That in all of the ceremonies, whether it's, a sweat lodge or Sundance, whatever, your whole, it's not just an experience in your awareness, your whole body is involved, okay? Your whole body gets transformed by that ceremony. You can't Sundance with your eyes closed, you have to be aware and open and vulnerable was the word, in order to feel God, was what I was taught. And that was fantastic. It was absolutely fantastic. And I think always meant to be, because when Maharishi used to talk about heaven on earth, I used to get this feeling inside me, not heaven on earth, heaven in earth. Okay. So I somehow knew that for my path and what I was meant to experience and what I was meant to share with others, that I needed to learn how to, and teach others how to, take our bodies with us on the journey. Right. So in other words, not just to have that infiniteness in awareness, that I am that with the capital T, but for every cell in our body to recognize as what I call the first light of creation. Your body can't become infinite or it's gone, but it can self-recognize as what we could call first or divine light, which is just that very, very first, very delicate, but also virtually infinite expression of the infinite. I call it light. It isn't really light. It's kind of pre-photon light. It's just the very, very first something as opposed to the void of the infinite. And it is also something which is virtually infinite, and which you have to become. It's very difficult to talk about it. You become it as opposed to the infinite. So I called it for the first light of creation because of this inspiration to take my body with me and help others take their bodies with them on the journey. It's an option for humanity, which is, the door is wide open now.
Well, when I heard you, I don't remember what I heard in particular. But
I don't remember what I said.
Yeah, right. Who knows? But I do know that I had my experience with TM and transcendence and unity, because I had a number of experiences of unity with others and of perception of the divine that came, like much as you described with your experience. I mean, maybe not exactly the same, but and then they would just sort of, kind of settle down, and it would be available, but not necessarily dominating my experience all the time. But there was a stepwise. But by the time, so let me see, I don't know how many years that is. It was 40 years. So it was over 40 years. 2017, 17 plus 29. Yeah. Oh dear, that's a long time. Until I ran into you again. But the you talked about this earth-based spirituality is how I would say it in short language.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew then that's what I needed, that I had, and I had gotten married and had children and made a decision and it was very grounding, but I would still, now at a point in my life where that phase was sort of over and I was drifting again. And I spiritually was sort of at a little bit of a loss because I really wanted to have my experience more grounded. And that was what was such a draw to you, because you had the Vedic background, and that was my ABCs, right?
Your language, right?
Yeah, that was my language. And so, but I also know I needed something different. And I also have been very attracted to, Native American culture, not really knowing why, but at any rate, so that was a big draw for me.
I have to tell you that after you called me that first time and said, "Are you Cynthia Lane?" and you taught me TM, I got off the phone and I cried. There was something so deeply moving to me that I had taught you TM all those years ago, and now there was this big circle, and we were connecting again on this whole new path. Just so you know. I never told you that.
It was really profound, but we also had really, really profound relationships with Mary, particularly with Mary Cobb,
who was my very best friend, not just any old friend.
Not just any old friend. And she was a dear friend to me and very much a guiding light. Not just because she had been a TM teacher, but because of the way she lived it. I mean, it was right. So
and then we could do a whole show on Mary too.
Yeah, we could do a whole show on Mary. And we knew we knew the side characters too. So that
right.
but at any rate, so you then also had a period of silence, and now you also had an association with a man named Bill Bauman, who is not someone I'm familiar with. I know a number of your students are, and I wonder if you can just say a little bit about that. And then also you've recently, your teaching has recently come from, Mary Magdalene also. So whatever you want to say about that, we have.
I met Bill when I was living in the Washington, D.C. area and teaching TM there, and I was referred to him by a friend, and he was a very interesting man because he had a PhD in psychology, and his office was set up as if it was a regular practice, but that's not where he lived. He was really about spiritual life, and I recognized him right away. It was like an instant kind of connection, a very deep connection. And I only got to know him briefly in person. And then I left Washington, D.C. and moved to Iowa because I just needed a break. It was pretty intense teaching TM in downtown Washington. And but then we reconnected by the phone, and the relationship went on and on. And I feel he's such an interesting combination of a PhD psychologist, plus he was also fully trained as a priest, a Catholic priest, and he did that for a number of years. And then he even learned TM and practiced it for a couple of years. So he had a lot of different threads running through him, but he was, a way enlightened, expanded human being, but with all of this other knowledge to feed into the way that he, could help people. And he was really a model for me and a mentor for how to help people and how to work with people. Whenever I was around him, either individually or in a group, I was glued to the process and to what he said. And I just learned, not only did I grow spiritually, very much so, but also learned how to work with people in I hope, is a very gracious and supportive way.
So, and then that was.
So I met him in 1993.
Yeah.
Again, just before I left for Washington, D.C. I didn't work with him again for a whole nother year. Then I worked with him kind of on and off over the years, for the next 10 years, not in an everyday kind of way, but here and there, on and off. But every contact was very enriching, and I'm very grateful, very, very grateful to him.
And that was also during the years when you moved further out west. From
Iowa. I am always moving. I am a geographically unstable person. From Iowa, I went to San Diego, and then from San Diego, I went to Santa Fe, and then from Santa Fe, I went out to Utah, where Bill was living at the time, actually. And then from Utah, I came back to Santa Fe, and then I went to France, and then I came back to anyway, kind of goes like that.
Right.
But I've actually been in Santa Fe in the same house now for 11 years, which is a record for this lifetime. I have never lived anywhere longer than 5 years.
Well, you and I are kindred souls, right?
Right.
Which is why I get to whine and complain to you a lot.
Right.
About, where's home anyway? Where is home? So can you tell us a little bit about your time in France and your, what your opening with Mary Magdalene?
Okay. So the second time I went to France, and again, who doesn't want to go to Paris? I'd always want to go to Paris. I had the opportunity to be there for 3 months. And before I went, various friends said, "Oh, you have to go here, and you have to go there, and you have to go there." And each and every place that was recommended was associated with Mary Magdalene, about whom I knew, really very little. And so I said, okay, I'm going to be on the Mary Magdalene trail, I guess. Somebody very, very kindly had given me a free place to stay in the Languedoc region, which is an area that's strongly associated with Mary. And from there, myself and a couple of other friends, that was our base camp, so to speak. And we traveled around. But at one point I was in a town called Rennes-le-Château, which is very much associated with Mary Magdalene. And they have a cathedral, a chapel, a very tiny place associated with her. It's dedicated to her. Mary Magdalene, by the way, though it's not accepted by the church that she was married to Christ, but what is accepted is that she was in southern France, and she is considered a saint. She's considered Christ's first evangelist. So she's as I experienced, the Catholic Church in France had a strong, deeply feminine and beautiful quality and a deep respect for her. So anyway, I'm in this tiny chapel, and you're in a chapel. What do? You close your eyes and meditate. And so I was just sitting very quietly with my eyes closed in the chapel. And suddenly it's like, I don't know how I knew it was her presence. I think she announced it. I felt her presence. And I didn't feel it just outside me. I felt it like emerging, a deep, deep, deep union. This is not channeling. Okay, way different than channeling. This is merging. And the understanding I was given with that experience, it was as if Mary Magdalene was saying, and I put that in quotes because it's a kind of a spiritual knowing. She said, "I love you so much," and she didn't mean me. She meant all of humanity. I love you. I love humanity so much that I am going to take care of the rest of your path. No more hard work, no more processing, no more meditating for umpteen hours, no more spiritual marathons. If you just open your heart and let me in, my love is so great that it will take care of everything for you. And out of that came all the teaching, an amplification of that, of course, all the teaching I've done ever since. I call it the path of grace. And Mercy will tell you that I start every meditation by allowing people to drop into their hearts, and which puts them in a place of maximum receptivity to experience divine light and divine love, which does a lot of work, accomplishes great things all on its own.
So that it's really transformed the way that you work, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
I think one thing that really sort of intrigued me about it was the message that that we really didn't have to go through all these techniques and of healing.
No more. You don't have to process anymore. My love this is divine love, and it can heal and transform anything, and it will. You just have to let it in.
Right. So the doing is really just receiving.
It's surrender.
It's surrender.
It's about surrender.
Right.
It's about allowing rather than making something happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well.
Which is something that Bill used to talk about too. Allowing rather than making something happen.
Right. Right. I mean, it really does tie into sort of a lot of ancient teachings, and yet at the same time, there's a lot of busyness out there in the spiritual world. And
yes, there is.
Yeah. And it's
and no one teaching is going to be a perfect fit for everybody. Right. Because we're all put together slightly differently. We're each different packages of divine light, different packages of divine love, but we're each here to be the infinite, but then to share the infinite through this in our own unique way. And so, right at the moment, I mean, the universe is cheering us on like crazy to find our way home to the infinite. So there are many teachings, and many paths, so that I think everybody can find something that fits. So if you're predominantly strawberry, you can find a strawberry path home. If you're predominantly, pecan, you'll find a pecan path home. If you're chocolate, and so on. So this is what I have been given to share, and I'm grateful beyond measure to have anything to share at all, much less something which is so fulfilling for me to experience and share. But it doesn't. But I don't want in any way to minimize everything else that's out there. Not at all.
Right. So yeah. Again, it is a match, and it was, I guess for me, it's been a really good match. Now, I just do want to, own up to the audience that I have probably been like a really difficult student at times. I have been scratching my way.
You like to play devil's advocate. It's so fun.
Well, I've been scratching my way out of a lot of desires, and So I have not been always really the most receptive audience for the simplicity of your message, but it's, but there's no question for me that what a difference it makes, and that even, as I have questioned, like those college students, that I just keep moving along, right? And one piece that's been really important to me and that I know that you've probably seen the change in me. I could say it's been quite definite, is that my relationship to the earth is very different.
It's become a big player.
It's been a big player.
A major thread.
I'm not a person who's in the garden. I'm not a big backpacker, but it is, I even had a year of living alone on 100 acres, of ranch land. And my main companions were a flock of turkeys and a little herd of deer and a raccoon and a peahen that sat on my deck. But it really there's no question that has really solidified for me, in a way that, it's hard to describe what difference it makes.
You've opened up to the earth's love. Okay. Most people in our society are oblivious or only minimally aware, but we are the earth's children just as we're God's children, and you have allowed that love to come in, literally move through you and nourish you, and you feel it, and it's an important player, an important part of your guidance system for where to go next and what to do next.
Right. So as this itinerant, similar to you, I mean, I have friends who joke about it. They count how many times and I'm just kind of used to it now. But the reason I'm in Scottsdale, Arizona now is because I came through here, and I remember hiking in this barren land. I'm from New England. I mean, this just in a sense, it's interesting to visit, but it doesn't make a lot of sense. But I always felt such joy. And I just, as you said, the earth here really loves me. And I think it's for a time, it's serving a purpose for a particular time. But for me to make decisions in my life based on that is a very different way of approaching life than, from a plan or
you stop trying to figure things out, and you allow the universe, the earth, the voice of your soul, to be your guidance system. Mm-hmm. To do that, you have to come to a place of enormous inner silence. And by living in such an empty place, you've emptied out of a vast amount of belief systems and sources of internal chatter, so that now you can and will hear the voice of your soul, your own guidance system, and the earth, plays a role in that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I went through the same experience when I first moved to New Mexico for between 4 and 5 years. It was me and God and the earth, and that was it. No TV. I did have a radio. I just couldn't afford a TV. So it was a life of extreme simplicity. But, now I live a life, and I teach in this way is also where I call it hear and obey. I know, I don't doubt, I follow, I do it. I trust that my guidance is from the deepest level of creation and from the infinite itself.
Mm-hmm. So I think that this is a good place to stop. And I want to make a comment to the audience that I think you've gotten a real taste of Cynthia and her teaching. And, not only what her path has been, we could do a number of more shows because there's so many details about how you teach, even the things we've done together that I've in your mentoring program that would be, I think really interesting to talk about. But I think you've just witnessed, what kind of teaching and what kind of experience one can have with a teacher like Cynthia. And my last question on our little outline, I always do an outline here, is, do you have a personal life?
I'm not sure what you mean by that. I have friends. I have a ton of friends. I've many, 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 many people that I love. I could be a full-time job just keeping up with all of them.
Right. You have
I go to the grocery store. I cook food. I'm not a very good cook. I take my car to the fix-it place. I get dental work. That's what I did this week, so it's in my mind.
Oh yes, the dental work. God's in the dentist chair.
Right.
Actually, I have to say I have some blessings in the dentist chair. But at any rate, yes. So at any rate, I just want to mention, and I will put this in the show notes, that Cynthia's website is First Light Transformations. You can learn a little bit more about her then if you're interested in her teaching and her offerings. It's there. And I just encourage you to reach out to her. And also you're welcome to contact me if you have any questions. My name is Mercy Russell. This is the Remarkable Relationship Show. I've been here today with Cynthia Lane, and we look forward to the next time that we do this.
Thank you from the bottom of my heart for the opportunity to share, and also for being part of my life.
Thank you very much for being in my life. It's a God-given relationship. Bye.
Bye-bye.